Good afternoon, everyone. Call to order this public hearing. Today's public hearing is convened under the provisions of the Local Government Act of British Columbia to hear submissions relative to the proposed bylaw. All persons who believe that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters in the proposed bylaw. I would ask those members of the public who wish to speak to commence your address to this board by clearly stating your name. The board will not debate the matters of a proposed bylaw with individual citizens, but members may ask questions of you following your presentation. The main function of this public hearing is to listen to your views. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making their views heard. Bylaw number 2839 would rezone 878 Harwood Drive in Blue River from R3 residential multifamily zone to R1 residential single and duplex zone to allow a single family dwelling. Mr. Corporate Officer, are there any written submissions?
There were no written submissions received for this hearing, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any in-person submissions? Calling for the first time for in-person submissions. Calling a second time for in-person submissions. I will call a third and final time for public in-person submissions. There being no speakers, I declare this public hearing closed. All right, call to order this meeting of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District for Thursday, the 18th of April, 2024. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district. And today we are located on the Tecumloops-Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tecumloops-Secwepemc and respects the territory and land on which we gather today. Former BC Lieutenant Governor Iona Campagnolo passed away at the age of 91 on April 5th, 2024. She made history as British Columbia's first female lieutenant governor and held the role from 2001 to 2007. Her remarkable contributions extended beyond her tenure, including advocacy for climate action, gender equality, and First Nations reconciliation. The Prime Minister recognized her as a trailblazer and a role model for women in politics. We have no alternate directors with us today, but Director Herb Graham and Director Al Rain are both joining us via the wonders of technology. The Thompson-Nicola Regional Library is delighted to announce that Michael Christie, the celebrated author of Greenwood and the TNRL's chosen One Book, One Community Read for 2024, will be holding readings and writing workshops at libraries across the regional district from May 3rd to May 7th. Christie's award-winning novel, which is based in BC, weaves the history of a family with the beauty of an ancient forest and the impact that our choices make. Please visit the library's website at www.tnrl.ca for more information. There will be a grand opening of the newly renovated and expanded TNRD McClure Fire Hall on Saturday, May the 4th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. The activities will include a ribbon cutting, a community barbecue, a tour of the new fire hall and firefighting equipment, and fire smart education and demonstration. Everyone is more than welcome to attend. The Spring Waterworks newsletter will be mailed to water system customers in the next week, along with their Q1 2024 utility invoices. A reminder that as approved by the board, utility rates will be increasing effective Q2 of 2024. Specific information for each utility water system regarding the changes will be further communicated to customers in the spring newsletter. And it is that time of year. Seasonal watering restrictions are in effect for all TNRD community water systems each year, which are set by the TNRD's Water Conservation Plan and apply to the use of treated drinking water. May 1st to September 15th, even-numbered properties can water on even-numbered days. Odd-numbered properties can water on, wait for it, odd-numbered days. There is no watering between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. daily. If any of the directors are asked questions regarding watering restrictions, please encourage them to visit our watering restrictions webpage. Very long URL here, so just go to the TNRD website and go from there. Chair's update. I was very happy to see representatives from the Ashcroft Hub Society in Ottawa on April 15th to accept the Canada's Volunteer Award in the category of Social Innovation for the Ashcroft Hub. In 2015, a group of community volunteers took over our then closed elementary school, turned it into a multi-purpose hub, not only for Ashcroft, but for Cache Creek, Clinton, Spence's Bridge, areas E, I, and J. And it was fantastic to see the Hub Society recognized as one of 20 recipients of the Canada's Volunteer Award nationwide. It was particularly exciting that it happened this week, which is Volunteer Week, April 14th to 20th. So if you know a volunteer or you are one yourself, then please give them a big thank you and try to imagine what our communities would look like without volunteers. Very bleak is the simple answer. Volunteers do so much to improve the quality of life for all of us, and they all deserve a big thank you. And then something a little bit exciting for me anyway. As some of you know, I'm a history buff, and I was watching Jeopardy on April 15th. And they were in double jeopardy, getting down to the final questions. They had the $400 questions left. And there was a category called Road, R-O-A-D, scholarly. The question or the clue was, built into the Fraser Canyon, the Caribou Road served those pounding their way to the gold rush in this country. And one player who didn't end up winning, but he did buzz in with the correct answer, what is Canada? I managed to get a screen grab of the photograph. And then this was one of two photographs that accompanied the reading of the clue. This was the first one. This is the 17-mile bluff north of Yale. And then the second one is a much better, it's called Bluff on the Caribou Road. It has a variety of titles. Both pictures were taken by Frederick Daly, who was a photographer from England who came to the west coast of Canada. And in 1867 and 1868, he traveled the length of the Caribou Wagon Road taking photographs on glass plates, which somehow survived. This is almost certainly one of the most iconic photographs ever taken in Western Canada, probably in all of Canada. It shows the split rock at Martel, just north of Spence's Bridge. I have a framed copy of this picture hanging on my wall because why not? And it was really exciting to see this picture on Jeopardy. Millions of people were watching it. I'm probably the only one who literally leapt out of her seat and squealed. My husband thought I was having a seizure. So anyway, that was just a really exciting thing to see this picture from the TNRD on Jeopardy for people all over the world to admire this iconic photograph. On to something much more prosaic, which is upcoming meetings and events. April 30th to May 3rd, we have the SILGA convention in Kamloops, so right here in beautiful Kamloops. Wednesday, May 15th at 10 a.m., we have Policy and Governance Committee meeting. Thursday, May 16th at 9 a.m., we have Electoral Area Directors Committee meeting. Thursday, May 16th at 1:30, we have a regular board meeting. And today in your blue folders, you will find regular mail, the board code of conduct, and the 2023 annual report. Excuse me. So we move on to additions to deletions from the agenda. Are there any? No? Motion to approve the agenda as presented. Director Getz, thank you. Seconded by Director Smith. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Whoops. We go on to the minutes of the regular board meeting from March 21st, 2024.
Move the minutes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Smith, seconded by Director Hall. I saw your hand go up. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none on the question, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Oh, and there was one further piece of from Chair's announcements. Everyone I know is always on their best behavior here, particularly as we have two visitors in the gallery today. My parents, Bill and Heather Haycock, AKA Mom and Dad, who lived in Ashcroft for 27 years. They're residents of Penticton, but they found themselves in Kamloops and decided this was the happening place to be. So they are here today. Hello. I've told them that when it comes to questions from the public, they are not allowed to say anything. All right, we move on to item 7.1. We have, oops, no, I think I have. Nope, so 7.1. We have a recommendation regarding zoning amendment bylaw number 2839. Director Onslow, seconded by Director Sao. Are there any questions or comments? On the question, then, all those in favor? Reminder to Directors Rain, I don't see Director Graham there. Director, aye, thank you very much. That is carried. We have on item 8.1, an opportunity for the owners of on Pettit Creek Road in electoral area N to make representations. Or is anyone here to speak to item 8.1 building infraction? No? All right, we move on to item 8.2, another building infraction, a stop work order at 681 Green Lake Road South. Do we have anyone here to make representation on this?
Chair, the owners of this property did request to address the board by Zoom and they were sent that link. However, they do not appear to be on this call at this time.
All right, thank you very much. Unfinished business, item 9.1, building infraction in electoral area N. We do have a recommendation. Director Ranta, thank you. Seconded by Director Middleton. Any discussion on this? No, on the question then, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Item 9.2, building infraction 681 Green Lake South Road. We have a recommendation. Director Thorpe, thank you. Seconded by Director Blackwell. Any discussion? Director Getz and then Director Sal.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I know what a section 57 is and does, but I'm just wondering if we could have a light explanation of what a section 57 actually does. Because I'm not sure everybody knows.
Yes, through the chair. Section 57 is a notice that gets registered on the title of the property to identify a building contravention. And basically it sits on title, and if the property owner tries to sell the property, that notation is made aware to any prospective purchaser. So it gets us, reduces our liability as a local government. Sometimes it can also impact financing, which is sometimes an incentive to get them to come in and get into compliance. The big factor is it reduces and saves the TNRD harmless. And that's the reason it's built into the community charter. So it's really, really important that we put these on if we identify these risks. And if the owner works with us and meets and complies with the building bylaw, we can happily remove it even after the board has put it on title. So it's never too late.
Director Sal.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Lowe, was there any inclination of from the owner that he was going to represent or give representation to us? Any written message at all? What he wanted to say? Thank you.
Through the chair to Director Sao, I did have some conversations with the owner about his concerns, but I wouldn't want to represent him at this event when they have chosen not to attend. I can tell you that we did not receive any written representations that I'm aware of, and he was sent the Zoom link, so they did have the ability to appear.
Are there any other questions or comments? All right, on the question, all those in favor? Director Rain? Any opposed? That is carried. All right, we move on to item 10.1, zoning amendment bylaw number 2765. This is regarding a temporary use permit on Ford Road in Blackpool. We do have 3 separate recommendations. Move 1, thank you, Director Sao. Director Getz seconds, discussion. Any discussion on this? All right, on the question, all those in favor?
Right.
Opposed, if any? That is carried. You have a second recommendation. Move to Director Getz, thank you. Director, Director Sao, thank you for seconding that. Discussion. Director Sao.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Mr. Kraus and your department for your work on this, and maybe give Mr. Kraus an opportunity to explain, like, the conversations that we had surrounding these issues of RVs in areas that were for long-term living in RVs in areas that are not zoned for them, or well, even allowed. Because I know this is a, issue that not just in area A that concerns a lot of electoral areas. Maybe Mr. Kraus, you can speak a bit more to that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair. So there's two components to this. There's a rezoning for a portion of the property to allow an RV park, and that would be a traditional RV park. The second component is this temporary use permit, which would enable some RVs to remain in the manufactured home park for use for a form of residential accommodation. Certainly there's concerns because an RV is not designed or meant to be lived in. We reiterate that often. One of the challenges we have is we know across BC, RV parks, manufactured home parks have people living in RVs. And what's happening is when there is enforcement, some local governments take no enforcement, others do enforce, and people are just pushed from one community to another, and there is no place to go. And I think the idea with this is to try to find a compromise through this permit process to say, can some of the pads that are in this park that are vacant now be used for RVs? It's not a long-term goal of the park owner either, but rather than just have bylaw enforcement and push people away, this is seen as a bit of a, for lack of a better term, release valve, somewhere where people can go. And it is possible that if the board approves this, that some other parks will ask for the same, but at least we have a process and at least it can follow a similar path. That's the idea.
Thank you, Director Stamer, and then Director Blackwell.
Thank Madam Chair. To Mr. Kraus, just looking at the paperwork that was submitted, what about the addition of any additional structures tied with those RVs? Is there any concerns with possible fire regulations, building code infractions, those kinds of things with those additions that can be added on that same pad, particularly if they're looking at using wood heat as a primary heat source? Any concerns with the fire department, with the fire plans, evacuation, safety of those units? Many of them are only one exit type vehicles. What is the position of the TNRD on that?
Yes, through the chair, and that's certainly a concern. In the permit itself, we were able to put in some conditions, and one of the conditions is that there cannot be physical structures and enclosures, stairs, things like that to get in would be reasonable, but no enclosures. And so as part of this process, there's also a safety checklist that the tenant or the RV user will fill out and submit. We trust that the park owner will also have a responsibility and the manager there to ensure that safety rules are followed. And if we do get complaints that there are structures built onto it or there's wood stoves, then we would again enforce the bylaw because it wouldn't comply with this temporary use permit. So we think we have some conditions in place.
Thank you for that. And where would that information be available? Because all we have is the board report. Where do we see that information on the restrictions that are put on the permit itself?
The temporary use permit should be in the agenda, either at the end of the report or as a separate link, but it should be attached to the report. And if it isn't, then we will get that to you.
Great, thank you.
Director Blackwell.
Yes, thank you, through the chair to staff. I'll have a supplemental on this probably. What is the term of this permit? I think I'm seeing 3 years as the TUP on this.
Yeah.
And is that a renewable? Is it a one-time renewable as well? So this could go up to 6 years?
Yes, through the chair. So it's a 3-year term. The board can limit it to less than 3 years, but it would be 3 years. Then there's one opportunity for renewal to another 3 years. And then at that point, an owner actually has the right to reapply, make a new application and start over again. And that's one of the reasons that local government are using these temporary use permits more often, is it doesn't create the quote unquote permanent zoning, and it also allows conditions. But at any point, if these conditions aren't met, the board can then revoke the permit.
Okay, thank you. And just a supplemental comment on that. My fear on this, when we do this, is that at the end of the 3 years or the end of the 6 years, or even at the point where they are allowed to submit again, is that it will not be the owner seen as evicting people if this does not go through. It will be seen as the TNRD evicting people if we decide not to renew. Thank you. And my mic is stuck for some.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on this? We are on recommendation number 2. Anyone else? On the question then, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, if any? Director Blackwell? That is carried. And we have a third recommendation.
Second.
Director Ranta, seconded by Director Sarai. Any discussion? No. On the question, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, if any? Director Blackwell? That is carried. Item 10.2 zoning amendment bylaw number 2838 Lance Road in electoral area L Pritchard. We have recommendation. Director Smith, or Director Houghton, thank you very much. Seconded by Director Hayward. Any discussion? No questions, comments? On the question, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thompson-Nicola Regional District Cemeteries Regulation Bylaw number 2846. We have 3 recommendations. Director Laird, thank you. Seconded by Director Onslow. Discussion. First and second reading. Any questions? No. On the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Recommendation 2. Director Onslow, Director Smith, second. Any discussion? On the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, if any? Carried. And third recommendation, Director Onslow, you ran the board there. Director, still on the Jeopardy theme. Director Hayward seconds that. Thank you. Any discussion on this? On the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, if any? That is carried. We move on to item 11.1, Agricultural Land Commission, application number ALR 231. And Mr. Kraus would like to speak to this. Mr. Kraus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through to the board. So we've had a number of questions regarding this application, so I want to provide a little bit of context. The property is located in Knutsford, about 3 kilometers south of the city of Kamloops municipal boundary. It's located fully in the agricultural land reserve and therefore subject to their regulations on top of our zoning regulations. The owner has applied for a non-farm use to allow a construction office, contractor's yard, and truss manufacturing business, which would enable a local Kamloops company to move up there and expand their business into truss manufacturing. So the use is not permitted by the ALR, and it's also not permitted by the zoning or the official community plan. So rather than applying for everything at once, the owner has applied for this ALR application first before moving forward with anything else. In December of last year, the board may recall authorizing a notice on title for renovation work without a permit on this property. From a staff perspective, we have to follow board policy, and in this case, we have the Kamloops South Official Community Plan and the fringe areas policy, which directs manufacturing and contractors type businesses into the neighboring municipality, in this case, City of Kamloops. So staff did reach out to city staff and they reiterated the fringe areas policy and felt that land is available in the city. So it's based on these policies that staff here are recommending the application be refused, and that would end the application process. But we have provided alternative options, and they're page 2 of the report, which is page 92 of the agenda, I believe. And we have 3 options there. So one is to go with the staff recommendation. That would end the process. ALC is not involved. Option 2 is that the board authorize sending it to the Land Commission, and you can decide whether or not to make a recommendation of support or not support. And option 3 is to simply send it down to the ALC, but make no comment and let the ALC decide on this question of whether this non-farm use is appropriate. But if the application is sent down to the ALC and the ALC does approve it as a non-farm use, it will come back to the board again with a rezoning and official community plan amendment. And again, we have to follow the process. City of Kamloops will receive a formal referral, and staff again would have to make a consistent recommendation based on the policies in place, which is that it should be directed to the City of Kamloops. So despite staff's recommendation, it's entirely the board's decision, as all land use matters are. Staff did meet with the owner and we explained this face to face so that there's no feelings that we didn't advise them or they're surprised by this recommendation. But I wanted to help explain this recommendation and note that the board has options in their decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grenier and then Director Houghton. We first need a motion on the floor, however. Oh. Okay, so motion 2, which would be authorized sending the application to the ALC for a decision with a recommendation of either support or non-support, is that correct? And do you want to specify either support or non-support? All right, so Director Houghton has put forward a motion that we authorize sending the application to the ALC for a decision with a recommendation of support from the TNRD board. And do we have a seconder for that? Director Grenier. All right, thank you. What? We will in just a moment.
This one.
I'm afraid you'll be able to be heard at the end. That's when we have comments from the public. At the beginning, the comments were only about the subject of the public hearing or the 2 section 57s. No. Mr. Corporate Officer, did you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I can advise the TNRD's procedure bylaw doesn't have a public input section at the start of a board meeting. You do have the question period at the end of a board meeting when any member of the public can make questions about your discussions or votes that you take this afternoon. If there is a statutory public process, like say a public hearing on a land use matter, so rezoning or an OCP change, then that is normally done as you did today at the start of the meeting, and that's when any member of the public can speak about their interest in land. This issue with the proposal to be sent to the ALC or not is not subject to a public hearing under the Local Government Act. And so there is no public hearing on this scheduled for this item. So you would be purely in the public input provisions of the board procedure bylaw, which, as you have noted, Chair, are at the end of the meeting, not before.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, no. Our procedures bylaw does not allow for public input during meetings, only under very specific circumstances, as our corporate officer just explained. I'm sorry if you did not. So you're the proponent, you're the subject of this request. All right, so presumably you've been in contact with staff. Right. Uh, No. Mr. Corporate Officer, is there precedent for allowing someone? I know that we do not technically allow this, but
Chair, there is, sure, Mr. Kraus has some comments.
Mr. the Chair, in similar situations, there's applications like a development variance permit where an applicant also doesn't have the ability to speak. If the board would like, you can decide not to make a decision on this recommendation today and instead invite the owner back to a future board meeting to speak as a delegation. And then you could hear from them directly before making a decision on that. So that's an option that's available.
all right, thank you. Would that option be, would the rest of the board be agreeable to that option? And that would not be tabling this because tabling means it disappears into a black hole, but to defer discussion of this question and allow the proponent to come back and speak to it at a future meeting? I think it would be cleanest probably to defeat the motion that's currently on the floor and then make a second motion to, Mr. Corporate Officer, help me out here.
Thank you, Chair. There is one piece of advice that I definitely would provide, which is that if the board unanimously agree that you do wish to hear from the proponent, then generally speaking, even if it hasn't been done before in this manner, then it's generally agreed that if you do have a unanimous opinion, then you would be able to suspend that provision and provide someone the right to speak. Or alternatively, as Mr. Kraus has said, a delegation would be an entirely appropriate thing at the next meeting, in which case it would probably be easiest to formally defeat this motion, as you have said, and then after a delegation appearance at a future board meeting, you could exercise your right as chair to require reconsideration of the item.
And so just to rewind there to what you said at the beginning, if we voted unanimously in favor of allowing this gentleman to speak now, we could do that and hear him now.
I would say that would be appropriate because that would be a very clear expression from the board that in spite of your procedure bylaw that you wish to hear from the proponent. But if there's anyone who didn't, then we do have the other formal mechanisms of a delegation.
All right, are we able to move that while we already have a motion on the floor?
I think we can treat that as a motion that would not require notice, because that would be a motion to suspend the standing orders in the procedure bylaw. So that would not be subject to, yeah, that would be a always permissible motion.
Okay. All right, well, let's just have a quick show of hands. Is there anyone who would be opposed, who would rather that we defeat the motion and introduce a second motion to defer this matter to a future meeting and allow the proponent to come back as a delegation and address us? Director Newstater? Excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. Through to staff, I'm just concerned about precedent more than anything. I'm not concerned about making sure that we have a voice to this issue, but I am worried about what we are looking at in the future if this sets a concerning precedent for staff.
It would be my preference personally, just to defeat the motion and invite, to defer the matter to a future meeting and have the proponent come back. I think that's cleanest, and we are avoiding a precedent, which then would open the door for future people to say, well, you did it for them, why aren't you doing it for me? Unfortunately, it is a matter of precedent. We have the agendas, we have these rules for a reason, and it's just so that we can run the meetings in a business-like fashion and everyone knows what to expect and we don't get any surprises. Nothing personal to you at all. So we do have a motion on the floor. Does anyone wish to talk? Director Laird?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it would just be very easy to have a show of hands whether we support the proponent speaking now or not, and we can move on. That's our corporate officer says we can do that.
A
So
quick
let's just-
straw poll there. All those in favor of having the proponent speak now? All those who are against having the proponent speak now? Did someone do a count? Has to be unanimous. Okay, sorry, thank you. I'm not good at math. All right, so we go back to having a motion on the floor, and I'm going to call the question on that. All those in favor of the motion, okay, sorry, yes, we can have, the motion that we are currently discussing, which has been duly moved and seconded, is that we authorize sending this application to the ALC for a decision with a recommendation of support from the TNRD. All right, so that is the motion that we are discussing right now. So Director Houghton, who wishes to speak? Director Morris? Director Sarai? So Director Houghton first.
Thank you. This is probably the toughest job as a director I've had since I've been here. The family that is proposing this is a longtime homesteading family that have been here all their life. They're not somebody that's come and bought a piece of agricultural land and try and chop it up and move a business from town. The business originally, as it says in the report, was the Florido egg farm down in Mission Flats, was relocated up to Knutsford many, many years ago. And a grading station for the interior British Columbia was created there. And that's the warehouse or the building that is subject to what we're talking about today. Years ago, the chicken farm and grading station, everything was sold to another enterprise. And the grading station was shut down and moved down to the coast. And for the longest time, that building sat vacant. The land was a bunch of weeds and really wasn't being used. It was then sold to a cannabis operation, and along with the adjoining feed mill, it's right above it. And those poor residents had to smell that since then. And the owner, original owner, has since repurchased it back from the cannabis operation and has done a great job on cleaning it up. It's not a piece of ground you can grow anything on. It's gravel. I mean, surrounded by the neighboring families' houses on one side, a chicken farm on one side, a dog kennel on one side, and a cannabis in the feed mill. So, I mean, it's a piece of ground that needs to have something done with it. It's cleaned up the best it's ever done, and it looks great. They've terraced it, put a beautiful fence around it, fixed up the building. Granted, they did it without a permit, and not happy with that, but it's the way it is. And the reason I want to support it is we're having a tough time, like in the report of getting agricultural trusses built for agricultural community and for residential. We want a housing boom. And I know it doesn't meet any of the board policy and the ALR requirements as we have today. But I think this is a perfect example of where the ALC, and that's the reason I want to send it to the ALC, a wake up call for them for maybe we've got to change it a little bit. We're not taking a piece of prime irrigated land and chopping it up like I see happen in other areas. So, like I said, it's the toughest decision I had, and I'm going to try doing it. And we'll see what happens today, and we'll see what happens with the ALC. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Directors Morris, Sarai, O'Reilly, and Grenier. Director Morris.
Thank you, through Chair Roden. I just want to add my full support to obviously the motion that has been made. I have familiarity as well, literally on the ground on that piece of property, and I support the motion that has been made, obviously, as a seconder. So look forward to everyone's comments as well.
Thank you, Director Sarai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also will be supporting this motion for a support letter to the ALC. Contrary to City Council, we do have a lot of friends and supporters that are farmers. And right now they are struggling, and farming isn't what it used to be. And like Director Houghton said, this is a small piece of property that has already been commercialized over a number of years. My wife's family used to actually work in that egg processing plant in the 60s. So for us to help out a farmer have some extra income to support their farming initiative when those are unknown income levels is something we can do. The only concern that as a city councillor, yes, it's on the fringe policy, but having that trust company go off city land and off TNRD land isn't going to do us any taxation favors as well. So I think if there's something that we can still benefit from and helping the housing market that we all need, whether it's TNRD, our resorts, or our city, and we can have more than one company building trusses that are backed right up on orders and are delaying housing bills, this will be added inventory to help accelerate the need we have for housing. So I'll be supporting this, and it's also got to come back from ALC on the recommendation. So all we're doing is sending it down to the authority that has the power and showing them that we do support it and see what they say. At the end of the day, this could be a moot point, but I think we need to show some support here. The fringe policy back in the day might have been a great idea, but I think times have changed and we need to support our farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Director O'Reilly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be supporting it as the motions put before us. And Councillor Sarai touched a little bit, but I'm very concerned regarding taxation for TNRD. And it's not lost on me that if they don't go somewhere in the TNRD, they will be going very near the TNRD. And we will be having to pay for a lot of services without getting any form of taxation back. And I believe Director Houghton mentioned briefly, things are in policies and we have these things in place, but policies don't necessarily always keep up with the times. And again, Councillor Sarai touched on a little bit, but our fringe area policy is something that will be coming up for review. And we need to understand that, that it may be counterproductive to what we're wanting to do as a city of Kamloops, but what are we wanting to do as a TNRD as a whole and keep the taxation here so we can continue to fund the projects that we need to do for all our electoral areas and the things that we need to do for our region. And it's not lost on me that if we don't support something like this, we will lose the taxation as a whole. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Director O'Reilly. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask our Director of Planning, how old is the fringe area policy? When has it been looked at? And this particular application is not dealing with housing, it's dealing with the industrial application or business application. I continually hear about the shortfall of industrial land in the city of Kamloops, so I'm a little perplexed why we would not want to take this particular thing that is an existing building and use it for what sounds like a very practical use. But if you could give us some background on how old is the fringe area policy? I know that I encountered it when I first came to British Columbia on a housing matter, but perhaps you can enlighten me.
Yes, through the chair. I think the first iteration was 1980. And I think it came into board policy in 1984. It was last looked at, don't have it in front of me, I want to say 2014 or 2015. The board looked at it and made some minor amendments to it. At the time, it was quite progressive because it tried to really encourage cooperation with municipalities in rural areas and encourage those type of businesses to locate in municipalities so that they didn't go for cheaper land on the periphery, which also has an impact on farmers and ranchers because that drives prices up. So that was the theory behind it. If the board would like to review that, absolutely, that can be done. But as I said in my preamble, right now, staff just make recommendations and we make it based on board policy, and that's what our board policy tells us today. But of course, the board can choose not to follow their own policy or choose to direct staff to change policy as well. And recently the board directed staff to work on some official community plans around east of Kamloops. So I think all of this will come up and there'll be discussions about if city does say that there's no industrial land, then absolutely, let's find areas where it might be appropriate in rural areas. But I think we need to have those conversations because I agree with you. I hear there's no industrial land, but then I hear from city staff that there is industrial land available. So I don't know whether it's not available at all or whether it's not available at the price that businesses are looking for. That's the unknown, but I think that official community plan project around Kamloops will help bring some of this up. In the meantime, the board can make any decision that it likes on this.
Any further discussion on this? Director Lepso?
I didn't pay too much attention to this before, but I'm reading page 3. In the spring of 2023, while the warehouse was being renovated, a building inspector noted the construction did not have a building permit. In December 2023, the board authorized the filing of section 57 notice on title. Upon referral to the planning department, the owner and the tenant We're notified that the construction office yard and manufacturing shop are not permitted in the C6 zoning nor the ALR. Without proper zoning and ALC approval, the TNRD cannot issue a building permit. So I guess this is where we're heading is so this ALC application is the first step in rectifying the section 57 notice. So should the ALC approve the non-farm use, it's going to come back to us. What I'm reading, we'll have to do an OCP amendment. I'm thinking a zoning amendment. And then an application will follow. Should those applications be passed by the board, a building permit application can be processed. So am I reading that correctly somewhat?
To the chair, that's exactly it, yes. So if the ALC application is sent to the ALC will make a decision on it. The ALC turns it down, it's over. The ALC approves it. The owner will apply for rezoning, official community plan amendment. At that time, again, just to reiterate, staff have to follow the policies, so we'll be recommending against it, but the board can make any decision it likes at that point. And then there will be a formal public hearing and the owner, the tenant, neighbors, everybody can come out and speak and we'll have an opportunity to be heard.
Any other questions, comments, clarifications needed? So Director Middleton and then Director Getz.
Just a question, if we proceed with this letter to the ALR or this request to the ALR and then it does come back to us for zoning, is there a way in the zoning that we can make it specific to, say, types of industry that we're going to allow on the property, and that this all takes time? And is it possible that we go through all of this, we change the zoning, by the time we finally get to a zoning change where this proponent could actually do what they want to do, has the situation changed and now it's not going to be a truss plant that's going to go on there, and it's going to be something new that maybe might not have been quite so agreeable, excuse me, by the board. Just wanting to know, like, what safeguards could we put in place that this doesn't turn into something that is not, it's, the purpose that we think we're intending it to be.
Through the chair, yeah, the rezoning can be as specific or as broad as we want to make it. We can spell it right down to a certain type of business, a certain type of use. Or keep it more broadly to give them a little bit of flexibility in case plans change, so they don't have to come back for rezoning each time. But all of that can be narrowed down should the ALC approve it. Yeah.
Director Getz.
To the Development Services Manager. Just a question on timeline on ALC. We in Merritt are working on something and we've been working on it now for 14 years. And we're still working on it. I'm just wondering, do you have any idea on what that time would be? As I find ALC really works on their own time, which is whenever they feel like it. And like I say, we're going into year 15 on an ALC request. So I would hate to see that kind of happen here. So is there a speedy up kind of button that we can push, or no?
Through the chair, if I could find that button, I would push it. I certainly hope it's not 14 years. I think that must be for a bigger community-wide project or size of this room. Okay, well, I haven't seen the 14-year one-on-one application, but I think they tell us it's 90 days or something, but it never happens in that time. The ones we're seeing recently, 6 to 9 months, sometimes a year. How the ALC decides which one goes first, we should invite them here to explain that to us. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Director Houghton.
Just a quick comment. I'd like to thank Mr. Kraus for contacting myself a week ago and going through this whole report and personally asking the proponent, the owner of the land, not the proponent, into his office and explaining everything from front to back. And I know when Alex mentioned that to me, he said, normally that's not the way that municipalities do it, but in this case, he thought it was the best case, and I really applaud him for that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I am going to call the question, and just a reminder of what that question is. It is that we authorize sending the application to the ALC for a decision with a recommendation of support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. 11.2, temporary use permit application number TUP 73 in Clearwater Valley Road. We do have a recommendation. Director Ranta, seconded by Director Blackwell. Thank you. Discussion. Anyone have any questions or comments on this? No, on the question then, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, if any? That is carried. Item 12.1, CAO's verbal report. Mr. Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden, and through you to the board, I'd like to just provide a few updates. With the last update being a short PowerPoint presentation with Amanda, with our Director Ellison. So firstly, the Premier's Task Force final update. I recently had the opportunity to be a part of the final communication strategy along with Premier and Minister with respect to the 31 task force recommendations that were provided to the provincial government for action. I provided a brief overview of the process at the media event representing the Premier's Task Force. These 31 recommendations summarize the consensus, advice, and recommendations provided by the entire task force, and something that we feel proud of and something that we feel will make a strong change and a positive change in 2024 and beyond. I feel we have provided the advice that will impact our EOC and all EOCs across the province. And I'm happy to hear that the Premier said he would support all 31 recommendations from a support standpoint and financial standpoint. More detailed information will be coming in the near future from the province as they roll out that communication strategy. Secondly, I wanted to just provide a quick update on the TNRD annual report. Each of you have a copy of that in your blue folder in front of you today. And it's available for pickup from residents as well, or the residents if they feel like they would like a copy. It's also on the TNRD website on the annual report webpage and shared locally and through all of our media channels as well. In the report, you'll find information on the regional district as a government, as a region itself, information on our services, our 2023 achievements and financial highlights as well. It's jam-packed with information, and there will be an increased focus this year on including metrics from each department to measure achievements by our staff teams. In addition to some large-scale projects and metrics, it also captures some of the day-to-day tasks that we're expected to perform as a team. You'll also see the financial section at the end of the report with an improved layout to make it much easier to read and simpler to understand. As I've mentioned many times in the past, we are not required as a regional district to do an annual report, but we feel like there's great value in doing this, and it raises awareness on the work that we do as a regional district for our constituents. And it's a great profile for the region. It required a lot of input from all of our departments, but a special thank you goes out to Mike Coulter and Colton Davies for an exceptional job. It's a very professional looking document, and I wanted to thank them for that. The third topic was just a quick update on our out-of-town board meeting. The upcoming out-of-town board meeting is also going to be coined as the Ranchlands Tour de Merit. It's being currently planned as we speak. We will be reaching out to the EA directors as well as the mayors in the area for input and ideas. Building on great participation and success from last year's tour of the North Thompson, we are excited to get this underway and get it booked and planned for the middle of August. So you'll see more information coming on that and hope to see everybody there. The fourth topic is, and the next few topics are from Corbin, and I wanted to share them. Number one was the community of practice update, and it seems like a kind of a weird title, but this is an opportunity that we participate in, that it's staff from many regional districts across the province that meet together and learn about experiences regarding work that we do as local governments with other levels of government and First Nation. These meetings are scheduled quarterly. It's organized by the Metro Vancouver Regional District, and Corbin is our representative and has taken that lead and is participating on behalf of the TNRD, and will continue to provide updates as best practices and learnings come from that group. Number five, the Indigenous Cultural Safety Training for staff. We'll be continuing to work with our People Engagement Department to ensure our staff and management team continue their education
especially around cultural awareness and humility. We know that education is not the end goal, rather a continuing commitment to grow and learn. This continues to be a very well received from our staff, and from my perspective is very critically important to our organization and aligned with the board's strategic plan. So that cultural safety training will continue and has been very successful. Excuse me. And then finally, Silga conference update. As you all know, this is coming to Kamloops very soon. It's going to be a great event. TNRD is also sponsoring. Throughout the Silga conference, there's going to be a number of ministers that were shared that'll be part of that, that presentation. And there's opportunities for engagement with board of directors. Corbin will also be part of that, a panel discussion on Thursday morning to talk about advocacy and local government, along with representatives